And welcome to Transaction Trending, the podcast that keeps you at the forefront of the payments industry. I'm your host, John Mosh, and today we're diving into the world of payments compliance with a very special guest who's not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Joining us is Elly Aiala, the Chief Compliance Officer at Boost Payment Solutions, who recently completed ETA's Payments Compliance 101 course. Elly brings a wealth of experience across various fintech sectors, including B2B payments, blockchain, crypto, and digital securities. She's also known for her innovative approach to compliance and her belief in the power of embracing discomfort for growth. Today, we'll discuss payments compliance and explore how ETA's Payments Compliance 101 and 201 courses are filling a void for credible and timely learning within the payments industry. So, whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting in payments compliance, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So, let's dive in. Elly, welcome to Transaction Trending. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Boost?
Thanks, John. Super thrilled to be here. Elly Aiala, I am the Chief Compliance Officer of Boost Payment Solutions. If you don't know Boost, we are a B2B payments fintech. We optimize the use and acceptance of commercial cards through our suite of proprietary technology-enabled solutions. We work with both sides of the transaction, and I personally handle all things compliance, all the way from our AML program to the entirety of our audits, as well as just the insurance of all of our compliance cross-functionally.
Excellent. So let's talk about kind of the payments compliance landscape a little bit. You've worked across various fintech sectors, as we mentioned. Boost is in the B2B space. You've also worked in blockchain before. What are some of the learning challenges that you've faced as you've grown throughout your career? And can you share maybe a specific example about how the ETA Payments Compliance 101 course either enhanced your existing knowledge or maybe changed your perspective a little bit about payments compliance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Personally, challenges center around really foundational understanding of your own products and services. I think it also goes into understanding of your departmental policies and procedures, as well as a third and key piece to that is building a relationship internally with your colleagues, as well as externally to promote proactive compliance. And proactive is a key part there. I think we all understand maybe on the security side, proactive is better than reactive, but same thing on the compliance side. And as an industry, being a fintech, Boost Payment Solutions, a B2B payments fintech, it's possible for those fintechs and other companies to exist in somewhat of a gray area. You may not be a covered entity per se by some regulatory definition, but you may be working with a partner to provide some sort of payment services that puts you in a position to be contractually regulated. And this is challenging. A lot of, I hear it in the space all the time, talking to different thought leadership individuals or just people internally within my own company. And for this exact reason, I thought this course was fantastic because it provided you with an overview of all the regulators, specific to payments, who they regulate, what and why they regulate, to produce a big picture, a lens that you can look at to really combine and use as you build out your strategy, with the end goal, we all want to create a safe and efficient environment for payments.
I love what you said there about the proactive compliance. We talk a lot in the course that it's not just the compliance department's job, it's everyone. So I love your perspective there that we all have to be in this together to make sure that we're processing transactions safely and securely. So now let's talk a little bit about those foundations a little bit. Within the Compliance 101 course, we cover both the significant laws and the US regulators. As someone who's developed compliance programs for emerging issues and things that continue to change within the industry, how critical is that foundational knowledge within this course to help navigate the evolving landscape?
I would say it's mission critical. You cannot build without understanding your requirements to operate in a certain space. And going back to even your question before, every space that I entered in my compliance journey, my absolute first goal, well, meet and greet, learn the people, because relationship buildings, that's foundational as well. But then the next step is to truly understand everything that you need to know from a risk perspective, from a requirements perspective, from how your company works. And talking about the requirements, they're there for a reason. Our regulators, it's a job, but it's a very important job. And ultimately, it comes down to sometimes we can get lost in the sauce of all these requirements, but it comes down to protection of customers and protection of your company. And I think sometimes folks can center on it's just the protection of customers. We have, all these requirements. What do they actually do? But ultimately, it's twofold. It's customers and your company that you're protecting. You might not be able to see it with a tunnel vision, but again, if you get back to that big picture, which trainings like this training that I took for the regulatory compliance, it helps you look at the big picture. At Boost Payment Solutions, we have payments experts across all functions. Some even hold decades of experience. It's extremely impressive, and why we've been so successful, because that foundational knowledge, which our internal SMEs can educate our team and educate our partners and clients, it allows you to truly grow. You're growing on, a really strong foundation, because without that, building on shaky foundations, you can guess how that'll end up in the long run.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's also a way of having the proper compliance protocols really help showcase not only your expertise, but also that strong foundation that you've established over time. If you're constantly investing in your compliance and everything is running smoothly, you don't really have to worry about the customers as much because everything is already working in accordance with the laws and the regulations. So I love what you said about kind of turning it into a strength there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, as a chief compliance officer, how do you envision the foundational knowledge that you've gained within this course and throughout your career to enhancing that internal collaboration in the strategic planning at Boost that you mentioned?
Great question. I am a team player at my core. I feel like everyone at my company is a team player, and it's vital. And that exact environment has allowed the compliance function at Boost to thrive, because compliance indeed touches every department. So having a well-informed team allows you, as I mentioned before, to appropriately build, grow, and manage. And I think that's another big piece. It's not just the build and growth, it's then the management and the ongoing oversight to ensure compliance. If we know anything nowadays, it is absolutely not a one and done. It is an ongoing evolving environment. And so again, trainings like this, it's vital. It cannot be a one and done. We always need, you might know something about some regulation now, but that might change in X amount of time. And so going back to, if the compliance teams view themselves on an island as, the only ones who need to know about these laws and regs, you're putting yourself in the company at a disadvantage and creating potentially a great amount of risk. How is your product team that is building some new capability or enhancement upon what you may already have going to know that there may be some potential data privacy law risk, or even further than that, violation that you're unaware of? They might not know. And the last thing you want, and I'm sure I am, I'm speaking to someone out here, your compliance team is brought in at the end of a build. You're saying, hey, we've built this. How's it look? How's our compliance? It's challenging. And that's where us as compliance professionals, need to take a deep breath and then work with the team to alleviate whatever issue you have. The last thing you want is to have to walk back any work that your team has already done. But your goal as a compliance professional for your team is to ensure that what you're doing is not jeopardizing the company in any way. And so you get through that initial, hey, this is what we need to do, or maybe great, you built it out with compliance in mind. Next time, let's start from the beginning.
And I'm sure you can only imagine the amount of time that's saved when you're proactive about that approach and having that internal collaboration. It's much easier to build it out with compliance in mind rather than to have to go back and retool everything to make sure that we're staying in compliance, not only with what's there today, but what might be coming in the future as well.
Absolutely. If you don't invest now, you'll pay later.
Absolutely. Now, let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about maybe some advice that you might have for those that might be coming up in their compliance career. Is there any specific advice that you would give to those that may feel daunted by the complex compliance and regulatory environment?
Yeah, it is complex and it is challenging. And I think if I could share anything, it would be that you're not alone. I'd say that many compliance teams probably feel this way, particularly in the evolving space that is payments. I mean, there are things that keep me up at night just from we're in risk. It's just a challenging environment. If you weren't thinking about your risks all the time, maybe compliance isn't for you. But I'd say of recent, going back to not being alone in this, I've received more and more invites to intimate gatherings of compliance professionals, whether it's, a cold email, a cold message on LinkedIn, to discuss exactly this. And I love the trend that's happening because it seems like particularly professionals are being more and more open to ask for help and brainstorm together, obviously understanding the protection of their company's IP and anything that needs to remain confidential. But I think it's a really beautiful way for teams to come together and tackle some of these gray areas. Very on brand here, talking about ETA. Was the biggest fan of the ETA's compliant payments compliance conference. I thought the content in it was unmatched. I learned so much. A lot of it was refreshers, some of it was new, a lot of it was things that opened my mind to maybe risks I hadn't thought of before. And ETA doesn't stop there. Apart from the conferences, there's also, trainings like this. There's time to meet your peers at the conferences and outside of the conferences. Actually, I'm meeting someone from ETA that I met at Transact a few years ago later this week. So, the opportunities are there, and it's really important for us to leverage them. I think sometimes we can get in our heads and get a little concerned about what we're going to say, how we're going to be perceived. But no, you're not alone. What you're thinking, someone else has probably thought. And I think that's been my biggest thing for me personally as career is like asking those questions that I might have been a little bit timid to ask early on in my career. Ask them now because, again, going back to the foundational understanding of everything, you have to have that to be in the compliance function, because if your foundations is here and you're entering up here, you're going to miss so much within there that could potentially be concerning for your company or could potentially elevate your program. And lastly, on this, compliance is not cookie cutter. Your program, your risks, they're extremely unique to you and your company. In the same vein, a lot of us are operating under the same or similar laws and regulations. And so that's really challenging. How do you morph what you have under the existing laws and regs, especially when you're trying to be an innovator, as we are at Boost? I think a key there is to, again, leverage your internal expertise cross-functionally. Don't stay, siloed within your function. Reach out to all your different functions. Someone has a new process, understand how they do it. Because ultimately we want to create quality controls to address your evolving risks and then include ongoing monitoring after that to ensure that you're adhering to all of your responsibilities from both a compliance and legal standpoint.
I love what you said about the community there, that it's really important to build those connections, not only at the conferences like the payments compliance conferences, but also through different committees that the ETA might have. We have a committee that's focused just on compliance. We have one on AI, and really going to help bring people together and talk through what's coming and what's coming down the pipeline just beyond those conferences and events. So I love your perspective there, kind of building that community of other compliance professionals around.
Yeah, I will say I am on 3 committees, so I am a huge fan of that, and I am the person that asks the interesting questions,
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Yeah, that's actually a really good segue into my last question. So you're known for your belief in the power of being comfortable with the uncomfortable. What advice do you have for emerging compliance and risk professionals as payments compliance continues to be more critical and complex within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to speak up. Compliance is often about asking those hard questions. And this can be very uncomfortable. We know it, we've been there. But going back to what I shared at the very beginning, if you build solid relationships with your team, because your team, they're your first line of defense. They're the people who are going to help you maintain that proactive compliance because they're going to come to you with issues. If you build those solid relationships, these conversations don't have to be scary or uncomfortable because you've built that safe space with your team, because you know ultimately you're all going towards the same end goal. And it's a balance of your compliance department leading initiatives, but as I mentioned, it's also the responsibility of your team to speak up when new risks or issues arise, even if it may lead to nothing. I'd say over communication is better than under. If you build your team in trust, in ownership, in problem solving, and open communication, where there's no concern about someone receiving a certain question in a certain way, you were all on the same team, you've got the recipe for a strong compliance team and a really strong program going forward. And lastly, I always like to throw this in because I feel like sometimes compliance can get a bad rep as being a business blocker. But in reality, and I feel like the stance is really changing on this, is particularly nowadays, it can be a huge part of one's overall strategy, especially in a regulated environment. So as a regulated payments fintech boost, every single member of our leadership team operates with compliance in mind, beginning with strategy all the way down through execution. And I couldn't be more proud of our team, and I couldn't share how important that is for compliance teams to really have a tone from the top, work with that open communication, come with a problem-solving mindset. We're not a blocker, we're a business enabling function. And I feel like we're just going to see more and more of that. And it's great to have training programs like this that allow people to understand, here are the foundations, here are the requirements, here's the big picture. Now you make it work for your company and you do it as a team.
Well, Elly, that is a perfect end to our episode today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights, not only on this course, but also on the payments compliance landscape, and kind of how not only Boost and you and other compliance professionals are fitting into making sure that we're processing safe, secure transactions. So thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights.
Thanks, John.
And that brings us to a close of today's episode of Transaction Trending. We'd like to thank our guest, Elly Aiala, for sharing her compliance insights and experiences with the ETA Payments Compliance 101 course. For our listeners who would like to elevate their compliance game, remember that knowledge is power in this rapidly evolving industry. The ETA Payments Compliance 101 and 201 courses are available online, on demand, making it easier than ever to build a strong foundation in payments compliance. Until next time, keep innovating, keep learning, and stay compliant.